He ordered her to exit the courtroom, dismissing her as if she were insignificant. Yet, unbeknownst to him, her true purpose was to delve into the depths of his life. Amara Cole, quiet yet incisive, was dispatched by the government to unveil the brand of justice that conveniently turns a blind eye when the accused is black. Her voice remained steady and calm. She simply absorbed the words, and when the moment arrived, she rose to her feet. Yet, when power is shrouded in ignorance and pride is deeply rooted, will the system heed the warnings before it implodes upon itself? What unfolds when the woman you have belittled re-enters the scene, not merely as an observer, but as the appointed arbiter of your fate? If that stirred your heart, give a tap and share this tale. Now witness the unfolding drama as silence re-enters the courtroom. They claimed the court was accessible to all, yet somehow that rule seemed to exclude her. As the clock struck 9:02 a.m., she entered the solemn space of courtroom 3B. She moved with a deliberate grace. She moved forward without a moment's pause, strolled in with an air of confidence, fully aware that while they belonged, the majority might beg to differ. She donned a navy blue sweater, paired with khaki pants, and soft-soled shoes that whispered against the ground. Without a badge, there's no briefcase. A slender black notebook rested serenely in her grasp. She settled into a chair 3 rows back, positioned to catch a glimpse of the judge's expression while remaining inconspicuous. Today, she was known as Anna Davis, and that was all anyone needed to know. The air was thick with the electric anticipation of the morning. Attorneys huddled closely, murmuring softly to their clients. The steady hum of the HVAC mingled with the rustle of case files and the soft scrape of well-worn heels on the polished tile. Then emerged the voice, "Everyone, please stand." Judge Ernest Wilcox strode in, embodying the weight of authority that comes from years of presiding over this courtroom, a tenure that surpassed the lifetimes of some of the officers stationed outside. With a crisp robe draping elegantly, chin held high and gaze piercing, the presence commands attention. He took a seat. The court reached a resolution. A young black man faces charges of resisting arrest in the initial case. His wrists bore the lingering marks of the cuffs, a vivid reminder of restraint. His lawyer, a public defender who appeared scarcely past 30, rose to present an argument concerning the use of force. Wilcox dismissed him with a wave. "Let's reserve the oratory for those willing to pay for it, counselor. The evidence is unmistakable." He sprinted. He fought against the odds. "Let us move forward." Not a single person batted an eye, not the jury. Certainly not the bailiff, not the boy's mother, who grasped a tissue as if it were her only means of survival. All but one woman. In hushed concentration, she inscribed her thoughts into the pages of her notebook. The judge observed keenly. Initially, there was merely a spark of irritation. Next came irritation. He narrowed his eyes at her. "Greetings to you. Indeed, you, clad in the azure knitwear." All eyes were drawn. Even the accused lifted their gaze. Amar raised her gaze, unwavering and courteous. "Indeed, Your Honor." "Whom do you accompany here, counsel media?" "I am merely observing, sir." Her voice was serene, soft, crystalline in its clarity, yet it only served to heighten his agitation. "This is not a lecture hall, and I certainly don't require activists jotting down notes and gazing as if this were a trial for protest." A soft chorus of whispers floated through the air from the rear. "If you're looking to engage in activism," he remarked, "there's a park just across the street. This is a place of justice." Amar remained utterly still, his gaze unwavering. With a gentle snap, she shut her notebook, rose in silence, and offered a single deliberate nod. "Comprehended." She turned and walked toward the exit. "Take your time," without a hint of embarrassment. Yet, every gaze was fixed upon her, not for her words, but for the silence that lingered. The stillness she departed with resonated more profoundly than any eruption of emotion. A middle-aged woman, clad in a white floral blouse, stood near the back. Her silver hair swayed gently as she shook her head ever so slightly, her lips pressed together in a tight line. The bailiff cast his gaze downward, deliberately steering clear of Wilcox's penetrating stare. Even the boy on trial lingered by the door long after it had shut, as though something significant had just departed, leaving him with the unsettling feeling that it might never return. Wilcox rapped his gavel with authority. "Let us proceed." Throughout the remainder of that morning, His gaze frequently drifted to the third row, lingering on the spot she once occupied. For a man accustomed to wielding control, it was the first time in years that an unsettling feeling crept in. It was not the first instance in which someone had urged her to vacate a space where she rightfully belonged. Yet on this occasion, she allowed them to proceed. This time, the room held no significance as the ultimate destination. The system existed. Just 2 blocks from the courthouse, in a modest second-floor office that once served as a tax service, Amar Cole occupied a dusty wooden desk, devoid of any nameplate. The window blinds hung askew, their slats fractured and worn. The scent lingered in the air, a delicate blend of aged paper and a hint of lemon cleaner. Yet all of that was inconsequential. She favored it that manner. Simple, serene, easily overlooked. Upon the file cabinet that stood behind her rested a metal badge. Federal seal, Office of the Inspector General, Trung Thon Tra Dat Biet, Bo Tu Phap Hoa Ki. Yet, within the confines of that courtroom, no one had laid eyes on it, and she was resolute in her determination to maintain that secrecy. Amar Cole had no interest in accolades. She had come to observe. What unfolded before her that morning revealed all she sought to understand. She remained motionless, revisiting the moment in her thoughts. Wilcox's voice carried a certain weight, his tone laced with an assumption that her silence signified a lack of importance. It was not rage that stirred within her. Not any longer. That had long since extinguished. What lingered now was a sense of purpose, chillingly exact, unwavering in resolve. With a deliberate motion, she slid open the drawer and retrieved a slender manila folder. Upon the tab, and with a black marker in hand, E.J. Turner, age 14, has passed away. The photograph remained affixed to the front. With wide, innocent eyes and a gentle jawline, a child was tragically shot during a police pursuit, all for the alleged theft of a sandwich and a bottle of juice from a corner store. According to witnesses, he bore no weapon. The officer's body camera experienced an inexplicable malfunction. No charges were ever brought forth by the prosecutor. The judge rejected the wrongful death motion, citing insufficient grounds for its validity. Wilcox was the judge. Amara was unfamiliar with E.J. Turner, yet she had encountered far too many boys akin to him, whose names lingered longer in hashtags than they ever did in reality. This case was the catalyst for her affirmative response when the Attorney General reached out. That, along with the events of the last time she declined. 3 years prior, she unearthed a web of fabricated evidence within a Midwest District Attorney's office. 4 convictions have been overturned, and 3 officers have been indicted. The triumph captured the attention of the media. Thus, the death threats emerged. In the stillness of the evening, they discovered her car, its tires cruelly slashed, resting in the driveway like a wounded beast. A crimson X marked on her apartment door. The perpetrator remains elusive, forever shrouded in mystery. Following that, Amara ceased appearing in courtrooms clad in heels and tailored suits. She ceased to declare her identity, and she discovered that true power did not lie in raising her voice. It was in remaining the sole survivor when all others believed you had vanished. Thus, she exited courtroom 3B, her head held high and her notebook firmly shut. That is the reason she refrained from correcting the judge when he referred to her as an activist. Thus, she found herself in this moment, meticulously examining each decision Wilcox had rendered over the past 7 years. She had already marked 12 instances in which black defendants received the harshest sentences, even in the presence of mitigating factors. 9. Where crucial evidence was disregarded without a proper hearing. In less than 2 hours, 5 officers accused of using excessive force were exonerated. It was a motif, and it resonated deeply. Her gaze returned to the window where the sun poured in, casting uneven lines of light across the floor. She could still hear the courtroom door closing behind her, not as a defeat, but as an awakening. The true endeavor had begun, and this time she would not be stepping into the fray alone. The most challenging aspect wasn't uncovering the corruption. It was about discovering someone ready to acknowledge its existence. On a Wednesday afternoon, the message arrived via the secure line. Just a single sentence, devoid of any name. Join me in the shadows behind the records room. When the clock strikes the end of the day, I shall leave the door ajar. It was inscribed as if carried on a gentle breeze. the sort that emerges from an individual who has already cast a wary glance behind them on 2 separate occasions. Amar lingered until the clock struck 7:15 p.m. The courthouse stood almost deserted, the sound of her footsteps consumed by lofty ceilings and inexpensive tile. She glided through the dimly lit back hallway, weaving past the stern visages of retired judges and glass cases brimming with antiquated law tomes. The chamber of records lay shrouded in darkness. A door on the far side creaked open just a fraction. Within the room, a woman lingered in a worn gray cardigan, her hair pulled back sharply, her eyes flitting about like a sparrow ensnared in a confined space. Her name was Lana Price, a court clerk with 17 years of service and an impeccable memory. She was swift and purposeful. "I can't quite grasp your true identity," she murmured, "but I've noticed your gaze, and I believe I understand your purpose." Amar remained silent. She allowed Lana to express herself. Wilcox refrains from dictating what others should pen down. There is no obligation for him to do so. He casts a disdainful glance as a black attorney enters, muttering quietly to himself. On one occasion, he dismissed a motion without even glancing at it, declaring that he would not squander time on the reasoning of the streets. Lana took a deep breath, her throat tightening as she prepared to speak. "I have composed the order." I remained silent. The job was a necessity for me. I continued to do so. With a graceful motion, she extended the USB stick to Amar. Silence speaks volumes, devoid of explanation. Merely a subtle gesture, akin to the way individuals exchange notes when they harbor doubts about whether voicing their thoughts might lead to their dismissal. Or perhaps something even more dire. Amar inclined his head with a soft gesture, free from judgment, devoid of promises, and anchored in respect. The following day, she sought out a name hidden away in the depths of her contact list. Martin Hayes, once a prosecutor, now navigates the realm of private defense. They had shared the same school journey, varying shores, varying aspirations. She embarked on a journey into the realm of justice. He sought solace. He answered on the second ring. "Amar," he said, a blend of surprise and caution in his voice. "It has been quite a while." "I need someone to talk to," she said. A lengthy silence enveloped the room. "Are you asking me to publicly oppose Wilcox? I seek the truth." "The truth has its price," he murmured, "and it's more than I'm prepared to afford." She lingered in anticipation. "You think I don't want to," he added. "I've witnessed him discard families as if they were mere broken pencils. Yet here I stand with twins. Exclusive institution, home loan, customers who prefer subtlety over bold statements. You seek justice, very well. Yet, I implore you, do not request that I incinerate all that I have painstakingly constructed merely to validate a notion." Amar released a breath. Though it came as no shock to her, the pain lingered nonetheless. Once the call concluded, she found herself solitary in that plain office, attuned to the traffic beyond, a steady murmur of existence that persisted, undeterred by the fractures within. She delicately rotated the USB drive between her fingers. Lana's voice reverberated within her thoughts. I remained silent. The job remains a necessity for me. And she reflected on all those who had witnessed, understood, or listened, yet chose to remain silent. Not due to a lack of concern, but rather because they believed it would make no difference. Or perhaps even more tragically, for they believed that no one would support them if they dared to voice their truth. The strength of the system crafted by Wilcox was undeniable, not through sheer strength, but rather through a subtle, pervasive dread. A dread that crept silently, much like a fissure forming beneath the surface of glass. Yet it was precisely there that it held the potential to fracture. Amar did not arrive to subject a single individual to the rigors of trial. She arrived to demonstrate that the decay was not unconquerable. That silence was not the sole means of survival. The truth, once articulated, unveiled not merely the fractures that lay bare. It challenged others to find their voices as well. With a deliberate motion, she lifted the lid of her laptop, slid the drive into place, and immersed herself in the text that awaited her. This time, she made her entrance without stealth. The blue sweater is no longer present. Step out from the shadows of the multitude. As dawn broke, and she made her way back to Courtroom 3B, Amar Cole stepped through the front doors, clad in a charcoal gray suit. With her hair neatly tied back, The sound of her heels echoed in a steady, composed rhythm. A delicate gold badge dangled from her neck. The name upon it, clear and unmistakable. Amar Cole, from the office of the Inspector General. She had ceased her efforts to merge with the crowd, and it did not go unnoticed by those around her. The bailiff stood tall as she walked by. A young clerk let her pen slip from her grasp. A court security guard leaned in and murmured to a colleague, "Isn't that her? The one hailing from D.C.? As Amar settled into her seat, positioned in the same row, third from the front, the atmosphere in the room had transformed. The judge had yet to make an appearance, yet an unusual silence loomed, thick and palpable. 2 seats behind her, a junior clerk named Devon discreetly held his phone beneath the bench, fingers dancing over the screen as he texted softly. "She has returned. Wear the suit this time. The name badge reads Amar Cole. That Amar Cole." He refrained from sending it to the press. He dispatched it to the court administrator. Half a minute later, a notification vibrated within the confines of the judge's chambers. As Wilcox entered the room, his gaze flicked around before settling on a single point. There she stood. Here I am once more. The same seat occupied. Yet this time, she was no longer an enigma. She embodied a message. He blinked once, then resumed his stride, the robe trailing behind him as if the world around him remained untouched. Yet something had indeed transpired. He settled into his seat. The gavel struck the wood with a resonant finality. Silence fell over the courtroom as order was restored. "Let us move forward," he remarked. "We find ourselves lagging behind schedule." Yet there was a quiver in his voice, a mere hairline crack, subtle enough to escape the notice of most observers. Amara certainly did. The initial case unfolded with the familiarity of a routine civil complaint, centering around a landlord dispute. Yet Wilcox continued to cast furtive glances toward the gallery, sneaking brief peeks at the woman adorned with the badge. She forged ahead, never glancing over her shoulder. She merely jotted down observations. Serene, exact, steadfast. "Miss Cole," he remarked during a moment of silence, his gaze averted from her. "If you find yourself here in any official role, I trust you have made the necessary arrangements with the court." She shut her notebook, lifting her gaze with a calm and deliberate poise. "I am merely a spectator, Your Honor. You claimed this courtroom was not a venue for activists. I presume it continues to embrace scrutiny." The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Wilcox smiled, a narrow, taut expression. "Certainly there is nothing concealed here." Yet his grip on the edge of the bench grew firmer. He navigated the remainder of the docket with haste, his movements more abrupt than customary. At a certain moment, he interrupted a defense attorney mid-sentence and summarily dismissed the motion without a word of explanation. The attorney, perplexed, cast a sidelong look at Amara, as if sensing a shift in the atmosphere that had gone unnoticed by him. At the rear, a figure hastily jotted down notes, their urgency palpable. The whisper traveled softly from the clerk's desk to the corridor beyond, weaving its way into the city's intricate web of legal chatter. "She has arrived for him. That woman is not merely observing, she observes him closely." As the clock approached noon, Wilcox summoned an early recess. "The midday respite has arrived. I'll return in 90 minutes. He rose abruptly, almost toppling his glass of water, captured it. Restored. He strode out, with his chin held high. Yet his back was a touch too rigid, reminiscent of a man who has just realized he is under scrutiny from behind. Amara lingered in her seat for a moment, after he departed. She remained still, remained silent. Then, with deliberate grace, she rose to her feet. She adjusted her badge and stepped out, maintaining the same calm demeanor and steady rhythm, as though she possessed all the time in the world. For the simple reason that she did. She was not pursuing him. She lingered in anticipation, and he was beginning to sense it. Without a hint of forewarning, the summons arrived. Shortly after 1 Harupanum during Wilcox's second afternoon case, a court officer made his way to the bench and presented him with a folded note. He unsealed it, perused its contents twice, then cleared his throat. Intermission. "I shall be back momentarily." No explanation provided. There was an absence of eye contact. He turned and strode out with a rigidity that contrasted sharply with his typical gait. The corridor beyond lay in silence, excessively silent. He was guided not to his chambers, but along a secluded corridor, past the conference rooms and deposition suites, to an interior meeting room that had remained untouched for months, walls of a neutral hue. There are no windows, merely a rectangular table. 6 chairs stood in a row, occupied by a solitary woman who had already taken her place among them. She remained still. Her lips remained uncurled. She donned the same satis as she had that morning, yet the badge that once dangled from her neck now rested flat upon the table before her. National Treasure. Emblem of the department. Senior Inspector Amara Cole of the Office of the Inspector General. Wilcox paused at the threshold, if only for a fleeting moment. He entered, the door clicking softly shut behind him. Miss Cole. Honorable Judge Wilcox. Her voice lacked any chill. It was unwavering, regulated. A voice that had already made its choices about what would be spoken and what would remain unspoken. I was not made aware of any inquiry. He started to settle into the chair across from her. That is deliberate, she responded. He arched an eyebrow, a subtle gesture of rebellion. It would have sufficed to merely present yourself in court. Amara regarded him with a serene composure. I certainly did. You instructed me to exit your courtroom. With a deliberate motion, she glided a manila folder across the table. I am here to assess the manner in which you have conducted it. He unsealed it. Within lay transcripts marked with rulings, meticulously annotated notes, and 3 signed affidavits. One came from a former court clerk, another from a public defender, and one that caught his attention was from a retired prosecutor. He murmured, You've been constructing this. Amara remained silent. She allowed the burden of the proof to convey its own message. What's the endgame? He inquired. Are you asking me to express regret? Step down. What could this be? This, she said softly, is accountability. He reclined, arms folded across his chest. The weight of the pressure we bear is beyond your comprehension. The accumulation of unresolved issues, the clamor of the media, the public's demand for justice portrayed in sensational headlines, rather than through the intricacies of the law. From your vantage point at the desk, you observe and evaluate our actions as they unfold in the moment. You're right, she said, her voice a soft interruption. I may not be familiar with your burdens, yet I am certain of this. With a graceful motion, she extended her hand towards the remote, activating the small monitor affixed to the sidewall. Captured visuals, quiet. In the dimly lit confines of Courtroom 3B, 2 years past. A young black teenager stands trial, his voice barely above a whisper, nerves evident in his demeanor. Wilcox leaned forward, voice elevated, hands striking the surface with force. Silence enveloped the scene, yet it was unnecessary to fill the void. The unspoken gestures conveyed everything that needed to be understood. Under oath, you referred to him as street trash. He gazed intently at the screen. You dismantled his testimony, not due to the substance of his words, but rather because of his appearance, his manner of speaking, and the assumptions you made about his identity. A heavy silence enveloped the space between them. Amara allowed it to happen. We all carry biases, she continued, but from your vantage point, they transcend mere thoughts. They manifest as consequences. Wilcox remained silent. This is not an unjust pursuit. I have no intention of bringing you shame. I have come to remind you of the rightful owner of that bench, which seems to have slipped your mind. She inclined her body ever so slightly, only clarity devoid of anger. It is the rightful possession of the people, every single one of them. He averted his gaze, his eyes lingering on the shut folder, hands motionless, lips pressed together in a firm line. For once he found himself without a decree. Without any objections, there was no gavel to strike, no bailiff to provide support. The unvarnished truth lay bare as a woman, once commanded to exit his courtroom, now occupied a seat opposite him, cradling his destiny within her grasp. He closed the door gently behind him. That would have revealed too much. As Judge Wilcox exited the meeting room, his strides were crisp, his shoulders squared, embodying the demeanor of a man determined to appear unruffled. Yet, a subtle change flickered in his eyes. The corridor exuded a chill, the stillness palpable. He lingered away from the bench, not immediately returning. He strode past his chamber, traversing the hall, and entered a modest office marked exclusively as judicial liaison. He eased the door shut, then perched on the edge of the desk, as if wary of the chair's ability to support him, before retrieving his phone. Few numbers remained in his direct reach, yet this particular one belonged to Senator Raymond Trask, a seasoned lawmaker, a steadfast ally, and a rare recipient of Wilcox's holiday scotch, who invariably answered on the first ring. On this occasion, the phone rang 4 times before a voice finally responded. Ray Wilcox murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have a problem." A moment of silence hung in the air before the senator's voice emerged, sharp and measured. "It has come to my attention that Inspector Cole has arrived, accompanied by a collection of files, affidavits, and video evidence. This is not merely a trivial reprimand. She is meticulously constructing a case." Yet another moment of stillness. "She is not constructing anything, Ernest. She has constructed it already, and from what I gather, she did not seek out any favors." Wilcox leaned in, determined to confront it, to stay one step ahead. "I can reach out to some press contacts, suggest that this is driven by political motives, and claim she is aiming at conservative judges, exceeding her authority." Trask let out a weary sigh. "Ernest, really? You and I both understand how these situations unfold. A few compelling headlines, perhaps an undisclosed memo. Ernest, please cease." The line fell into a hush, and then the senator's voice emerged once more, gentler this time. "She isn't merely an activist blogger. She was chosen with great care. The appointment of the president. Do you really believe I would obstruct someone whom the White House is openly supporting? Do you really believe I would sacrifice my comfort for you?" Wilcox's jaw tightened, and there it is. "You are abandoning me in my time of need." "No," Trask insisted. "I urge you to close the windows before the house is engulfed in flames. Embrace the early retirement, craft a memoir, allow the storm to pass, and permit her to cast me in the role of the villain. You accomplish that on your own." The connection was abruptly severed. Wilcox gazed at the phone as if it had turned against him. For an extended moment, he remained seated, the room enveloped in silence. The ancient clock mounted on the wall ticked with an almost deafening insistence. He recalled the beginnings, the accolades, the requests to address audiences, the expressions of appreciation from the families of victims as he delivered a stern verdict. For years, he held the conviction that firmness equated to justice. The tone conveyed a sense of authority. That instinct signified authenticity. And now, those very instincts were being laid bare as evidence. He reached out to 2 additional individuals, a seasoned court liaison and a friend from the state bar. Both responded. Both offered their courteous sympathies. Neither extended a hand. He was not being forsaken. He found himself gradually fading into the background. Upon his long-awaited return to chambers, he found the coffee on his desk had grown cold. A clerk handed him a folder, deliberately steering clear of his gaze. Wilcox settled into his chair, opened the folder, and attempted to focus on the next case. Yet the words danced before his eyes, refusing to remain in place. For the first time, uncertainty crept in. He could no longer discern who was observing him. Which murmur in the corridor spoke of him? That glance was not merely one of respect. It was a moment of true recognition. The bench remained steadfast, yet the earth below had subtly transformed. Some stories remain untold, hidden away from the headlines. No headlines, no hashtags, only a court number inscribed on a yellowed folder, alongside a boy whose name slips away more swiftly than the ink upon the page. Jalen Whitmore, age 14. He found himself ensnared within a stationary vehicle, tucked away behind a convenience store, without a weapon. No charges of theft have been brought against him concerning any valuable items. A handful of snacks, only partially consumed. The store clerk had dismissed it, claiming he appeared frightened rather than threatening. Yet, the arrest took place nonetheless. The accusations remained, and the courtroom continued its relentless march as it always had. Wilcox sentenced him to 6 months in juvenile detention. He refrained from inquiring about Jalen's reasons for pilfering food. He never inquired about the appearance of hunger etched upon a child's visage. He perused the file, shook his head with a hint of disappointment, and labeled him a repeat offender in the making. Amara recalled the act of inscribing those words. She had perused numerous court transcripts. Excessive. Yet that phrase lingered in her mind. It wasn't the most brutal thing she'd encountered on paper. Not even close. Yet it conveyed precisely how much a boy's future was valued in that space. This morning, the case file lay open on the expansive wooden table before Wilcox. Amara stood at the far end, serene and poised, as two senior judges from the state's oversight committee listened intently. TV cameras had yet to arrive, but the recorders on the table and the multitude of watchful eyes in the room made it clear that this was far more than a mere review. A moment of reckoning unfolded. "Your Honor," Amara began, her voice unwavering. "This is a formal appeal for the reconsideration of an emergency case under federal oversight." She maintained a calm demeanor, her voice steady and composed. There was no necessity for her to do so. She possessed both the language and the significance of their implications. She meticulously outlined the voids, the overlooked context, the disregarded background, the unspoken assumptions. There was no need for her to embellish anything. The facts have already accomplished that task. Wilcox sat in quiet contemplation, his fingers intertwined with a grip so firm that his knuckles turned white. As she set the original sentencing transcript on the table and turned to the paragraph containing those 5 words, a repeat in the making, he regarded them as if they belonged to someone else entirely. Yet, they were not, and he was acutely aware of it. The boy, Amara, spoke softly, revealing his hunger. That was his transgression, and we regarded him as though he had already succumbed to despair. The silence in the room lingered for an extended moment. She then presented a meticulously prepared petition, already endorsed by the public defender, the state-appointed advocate, and the Office of Juvenile Justice. Only a single signal, Justice. Only a single signature remains. With a graceful motion, she glided the pen over the surface of the table. Wilcox gazed at it, the most formidable figure in that courtroom for 20 years. Uncertain whether he could rely on his own hand to remain steady. With a flourish, he affixed his signature. Silence reigned, devoid of words or justification, merely the imprint of ink on paper and the gravity of its significance. That afternoon, outside the courthouse, the sky hung heavy with clouds, yet the sidewalk seemed to radiate a peculiar brightness. There were no protest banners, no shouts echoing through the air. Only a small gathering of individuals standing in quiet solidarity. Among them was a teacher from Jalen's former school, a neighbor who had once slipped him granola bars, and a mother gently holding her daughter's hand. A local reporter approached an older woman, her faded blue scarf draping around her like a memory of days gone by. "Madam, how do you interpret the significance of this moment?" She hesitated before responding. She gazed up at the building, her eyes tracing the windows where change finally appeared to be unfolding, before turning her attention back to the reporter. "She didn't merely grant that child justice," she murmured gently. "She restored our faith, igniting a flicker of hope within us once more." Above, Amara lingered by the window. She offered no wave, no smile. Yet, what of her shoulders? They fell gently, as if at last releasing a burden that had been held for far too long. The beginning was not marked by a press conference. It began with a phone trembling in a person's grasp, capturing a brief, grainy recording from the gallery of Courtroom 3B. Only 2 voices lingered in the air, exchanging a handful of lines, until the pivotal moment arrived. Amar Cole rose, shut her notebook with a deliberate finality, and exited in silence. A modest entry graced the small local news page, devoid of a headline, merely accompanied by a simple caption. Her voice remained a gentle whisper, never once rising above the calm cadence of her words. By midday the following day, the video had garnered more than 100,000 shares. As dusk settled, it had permeated every prominent platform. People engaged with it on a deeper level. They observed it on 2 separate occasions, and then once more. They halted, captivated by her serene presence. They returned to the judge's tone. They remarked on the manner in which she held herself, not with anger, but with a weightier sentiment, akin to dignity honed through years of quietude. Then arrived the hashtags. "The visage of justice is unmistakable." She stood, silencing the courtroom, And then the tales began to unfold. Not from commentators, not from lawmakers, but from the voices of the people. Unremarkable, unseen individuals who occupied spaces in courtrooms, classrooms, and waiting areas, receiving messages through words, glances, or procedures that conveyed their lack of belonging. A former foster youth recounted, "I was just 11 when a judge laughed as I wept. As I observed her rise, an undeniable urge within me compelled my posture to straighten." A retired nurse shared, "I had been dismissed in courtrooms simply for donning my scrubs. Yet that woman, she made me realize, we don't require volume to make our voices resonate." A single comment, nestled beneath a clip boasting 2 million views, was elevated to the pinnacle of visibility. She remained silent, yet resolute. It resonated with a volume surpassing any demonstration I have ever witnessed. Marcus Leroy, the name that appears beneath the comment, was exonerated last year after enduring 12 years for a crime he did not commit. A verdict initially delivered by Judge Wilcox. His words slipped through like a whisper beneath a sealed threshold. They navigated their path into podcasts, morning shows, and editorials. Yet it remained unadorned by a headline, for it simply did not require one. It had transformed into something entirely different. Neither a scandal nor a takedown, but rather a transformation. Calm, deliberate, unchangeable. Amara Cole was not merely a topic of conversation. She was etched in memory. Moreover, they started to perceive the rooms they once occupied in a new light. In hushed courtrooms, during school board meetings, and within the quiet confines of government building waiting areas, they began to pose inquiries not with volume but with unmistakable clarity. For often, transformation begins not with a thunderous sound. It begins with a solitary figure rising, remaining upright long after their presence has faded from the space. He donned the identical robe, the same gleaming shoes, and maintained that unyielding posture. Yet, as Wilcox stepped into the closed door hearing that morning, an unmistakable shift lingered in the air. His presence went unheralded. The gavel was absent. As he made his entrance, not a single person rose to acknowledge him. The elongated wooden table lay ahead, adorned with the visages of those he had once regarded as colleagues. A handful of judges, a state ethics officer, a representative from the Attorney General's office, and at the far end, Amara Cole stood poised. She appeared anything but triumphant. She averted her gaze from him initially. He kept writing in her folder, as if he were just another name, another file waiting review. Wilcox settled into his chair. The chair emitted a creak that resonated more than one might have anticipated. He cleared his throat, a gesture honed by years of unspoken words, as if readying himself to share the thoughts that had long lingered in the shadows. Yet, the woman positioned to his right lifted a hand. "It is imperative that you heed only the words of Judge Wilcox. This is not a matter of defense." The term judge stumbled into the conversation, no longer quite aligning with the context. What ensued was not a trial. It lacked hostility. The chill was more profound than that. They perused the findings. Dates were enumerated. They cited accounts, visual evidence, and the overall atmosphere. Yet the most potent presence in the room was the silence. Silence reigns, devoid of anger or raised voices. Evidence piled around him, each piece a brick in an insurmountable wall, too numerous to navigate, too late to erase. In Wilcox, he remained utterly still. A man who once held the power to captivate an entire room with just a look now found himself unable to meet anyone's gaze. At a certain moment, an opportunity arose for him to present a written statement. He gave a silent nod, his lips remaining sealed. And thus, the transformation occurred. Not at the moment he relinquished his title, but rather when he found himself bereft of words. As the afternoon waned, a solitary page was affixed to the wall outside the courthouse clerk's office. With immediate effect, Judge Ernest Wilcox has made the decision to retire from his position on the bench. There will be no additional remarks. It required nothing further. At that point, the majority had already witnessed all that was essential. The man who had once silenced dissent with a gavel now exited the building in complete silence. A modest assembly of court employees lingered silently by the steps. A few heads inclined in agreement. Silence enveloped the room, as some chose to remain voiceless. Yet, the majority merely observed, not in a spirit of festivity, but rather from a place that resembled relief. Wilcox walked by without raising his gaze, offering no wave or word of acknowledgement. With his robe tucked neatly under one arm, he dragged his briefcase slightly behind him. He vanished down the sidewalk, akin to a shadow shedding its form. In the dimly lit hallway upstairs, Amar found himself standing solitary, his gaze fixed upon the weathered portraits of retired judges that lined the walls. Her gaze lingered on each frame, eyes flitting over the names, until it settled on one that remained untouched. Wilcox's. The image remained vivid. He appeared more youthful in it. With chin held high and eyes brimming with authority, she refrained from touching the frame. Feeling no need to do so, a junior clerk approached her, hesitating momentarily before finding the words to speak. "Miss Cole, it is complete." Amar nodded once, then finally raised his gaze to the wall, not with pride, but with an emotion that ran much deeper: comprehension. Silence envelops the air. "Power isn't loud," she murmured gently. "True strength lies in the art of listening." With that, she pivoted and strode down the corridor, calm and composed, leaving nothing but silence in her wake, and the burden of something that had at long last, changed. The steps of the courthouse stood in an unusual stillness. There were no media vans, no banners in sight. Only the sunlight slanted across the concrete, illuminating the dust in the air like tiny flecks of gold. Amar emerged, her heels tapping gently against the stone, creating a delicate cadence. She moved with a leisurely grace, unhurried by the demands of time. The burden of recent events lingered upon her shoulders, not oppressive but rich with significance. She lingered at the pinnacle of the staircase, released a soft sigh, and allowed her eyelids to flutter shut for a fleeting moment. As she lifted her eyelids, they came into view. A modest assembly of individuals congregated at the foot of the steps. A handful of recognizable figures, some she had encountered in hearings, others drawn by curiosity to witness if change could don a name they knew. Among the crowd, a small girl, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, held tightly to a juice box in one hand while grasping her mother's fingers with the other. She gazed, neither fearful nor timid, simply observing. Amara locked eyes with her and offered a subtle smile, the kind that eludes the camera's lens. Then the little girl leaned in toward her mother and whispered, her voice still audible, "Mom, is she the judge now?" Her mother appeared unfazed by the inquiry. She exuded a sense of pride, perhaps feeling a touch of emotion. She leaned down, gently tucking the girl's curls behind her ear, and said, "No, darling. She's the one who causes the judges to reconsider." Amara listened intently. For a fleeting instant, she nearly halted her stride. Not due to the language itself, but rather the authenticity that lies within. She remained silent, offered no corrections, provided no explanations. She continued her descent down the steps, weaving through the crowd, illuminated by the glow around her. As she glided past the building's edge, the sun embraced her in a gentle glow, creating a delicate halo around her shoulders, as though the heavens themselves had chosen to pay homage. Silence enveloped the room. Her name went unspoken. Yet, every gaze shifted and every heart paused, if only for a moment. For in certain moments, justice arrives without the sound of cheers. It arrives wrapped in a silence that embodies the essence of truth finding its rightful home. In the years to come, a young girl will recall the moment a woman emerged from the courthouse, not in triumph, but with an air of elegance. Occasionally, the most resonant presence in a gathering is the one that remains effortlessly composed. This tale transcended the realms of vengeance and clamor. It spoke of a silent resilience, of holding your ground when the world urges you to yield. Indeed, it revolved around justice. Yet, beyond that, it was a matter of dignity, and the profound ability it holds to shift the very landscape of existence. If this tale resonated with you, even in the slightest, I kindly ask you to take a moment to express your appreciation by liking this video. Pass it along to someone who holds steadfast to the principles of righteousness, and consider subscribing to Mr. Mac's Stories for more impactful narratives that not only entertain, but linger in your thoughts. Your support transcends mere digits. It's the very essence that drives us to share tales of significance. With each click, each comment, and each share, you are illuminating voices that truly deserve recognition. We extend our heartfelt gratitude from everyone at Mr. Max Stories. We extend our heartfelt gratitude from everyone at Mr. Max Stories. Thank you for your support, your faith, and for joining us in this journey that transcends mere video. Until we meet again in the next tale.